There's no doubt that California is one of the best states for both theme parks and roller coasters as a whole. In this video, I want to highlight a specific group of roller coasters, and that is the Multiloopers. For the sake of this video, these are coasters that have 3 or more inversions. This ranking is ultimately just my opinion, drawn from my experience on these coasters in the last few years. But before we get started, I want to note one honorable mention. There is one Multilooper in California I have not ridden, and that is Emperor at SeaWorld San Diego. This is one of those smaller B&M dives, but it looks to have some fun elements and some decent pacing. Overall, my guess is that it's a fun, not elite coaster. So, with all that out of the way, let's get started with number 16, Boomerang Coast to Coaster at Six Flags Discovery Kingdom, 3 inversions. Boomerang is one of those coasters that is better off-ride than it is on-ride. While the inversions are forceful, the ride does not track very well at all. Pair that with uncomfortable over-the-shoulder restraints, and you get a not-so-comfortable coaster. This is at my home park, but I don't know if I'll ever ride this again. I just don't enjoy it. Now, if it were smooth, that would be another thing, but unfortunately, it is not. The same can be said for Con in the same park. This coaster has 5 inversions. Other parks around the world have proven that a smooth SLC can be a really good, intense coaster, and there's no doubt that this ride has a decent layout, and objectively, it should have some good moments, but unfortunately, the tracking and restraints once again holds this coaster back. Con is definitely bumpy, and the big, bulky, over-the-shoulder restraints right next to your ears certainly don't help matters. I really wish that at some point Six Flags had invested into maybe just new trains for this coaster, because that could have made the experience a lot more enjoyable for all riders. Number 14, Demon, California's Great America, 4 inversions. Now, admittedly, it has been quite a few years since I've ridden this coaster, so I can't really speak on it too well, but from what I recall, this ride can tend to run a bit bumpy itself. The main reason for this is that this ride is almost 50 years old. Next year it will turn 50, and it was an opening day attraction for California's Great America. I remember vividly though getting pretty bad headbanging on those corkscrews, but now as my head clears the over-the-shoulder restraints, maybe that wouldn't be as much of a problem. If nothing else, I appreciate this coaster for its history and the fact that it is indeed a classic. Number 13, Viper at Six Flags Magic Mountain, 7 inversions. This coaster is basically a bigger and slightly newer version of D-Man. I think it has some of the same problems as all the coasters we've talked about so far, namely tracking, but in the case of Viper specifically, transitions. I think in the second half especially, Viper has some rough and uncomfortable transitions. That being said, I can still appreciate a couple things about this coaster. Number 1, the size and ambitious nature of it. Number 2, this ride has a pretty fun first drop. For the longest time, I feel like Viper has been on the chopping block, but it's still going strong, so we'll see how long it lasts. Number 12, Riddler's Revenge at Six Flags Magic Mountain, 6 inversions. This placing is probably going to be a little bit controversial, as many would probably place it higher on this list than I do. Unlike the previous rides, I wouldn't be surprised if this coaster moved up my rankings over time, because I don't have very much experience with riding stand-up coasters, and so I probably wasn't doing it in the best way. How you position the seat and the seat height is very important to making or breaking your experience. I tell you though, this coaster's size is impressive, 4,300 feet of track with a top height of 156 feet, and as I mentioned, those 6 inversions. Riddler's top G-force is 4.2, and in general, this is a relatively intense coaster. It's certainly not the forces or layout that I'm concerned about, it's rider comfort between the seat height and bending my head side to side, which I did have a little bit of a problem with. In general, sitting trumps standing on roller coasters. Number 11, Scream at Six Flags Magic Mountain, 7 inversions. This is a parking lot coaster if I've ever seen a parking lot coaster in my life, and while the layout isn't original, it is decent. It does kind of feel like B&M had a checklist. Vertical loop, 0G roll, 2 corkscrews to end the ride, and throw in some other stuff in between. But that aforementioned 0G roll is a lot of fun, and the ride is smooth enough to be an enjoyable coaster. Overall, it's a good supporting ride in Magic Mountain's lineup, but nowhere near an elite coaster. Number 10, Flight Deck at California's Great America, 3 inversions. Now this is a good classic. This is a B&M invert that originally opened back in 1993 as Top Gun. But when Cedar Fair took over, it lost the license and took on a much more generic theme. Even though the name has changed, the layout has remained the exact same, the highlight being the finale going over the water. The main critique with Flight Deck is its length. This coaster is over before you even know it started practically, but for what it has, it's very solid. Number 9, Batman the Ride at Six Flags Magic Mountain, 5 inversions. This is another B&M invert, and it's a bit more of a traditional one. This Batman the Ride model has been cloned countless times. It's true that it's not original, and it's true that in comparison to Flight Deck, the ride setting is far worse, but it's a little more intense. Plus, it has more prime ride time and 2 more inversions. Overall, you're getting more ride. Both of these coasters are good and a lot of fun. I just happen to prefer Batman because of its few extra elements. Number 8. Silver Bullet at Knott's Berry Farm. This one has 6 inversions. Let's continue and end the trend of B&M inverts. It might be a little bit of a controversial opinion actually that I prefer Silver Bullet over both Batman and Flight Deck. Some say it's not as intense as the other two, and outside of the final helix, I would agree with that. It's also true that this ride does have a pretty underwhelming first drop in terms of angle of descent. Because of where this coaster is located, they had to basically make that drop a ramp. But I think this location of Silver Bullet actually is a good thing, because it's a very unique experience to fly throughout the whole side of the park. One thing that's also important about Silver Bullet is its length. It's got 400 more feet of track than Batman and almost 1,000 more feet of track than Flight Deck. So overall, this stands as my favorite B&M invert in the state of California, and it comes in at number 8 on this list. Number 7. Medusa at Six Flags Discovery Kingdom. 7 inversions. Now if you're worried about length, this coaster is not one you ought worry about, because this is a very long experience. If you hadn't guessed already, I really value a long ride experience, and Medusa certainly gets you a lot of bang for your buck. This coaster travels 65 miles an hour and has just short of 4,000 feet of track. Unlike some of the other coasters on this list, this is an original layout, and it's a really good one from B&M. It really felt like they had liberty to do just about whatever they wanted. There might be some that are better, but in terms of floorless coasters, there certainly aren't that many. Number 6. HangTime at Knott's Berry Farm. 5 inversions. Admittedly, I was struggling a bit as to where to place this coaster because it's been a few years since I've ridden it, but this ride has some really awesome elements. Ironically, for a list like this, it's actually the moments of airtime that make this coaster stand out. You got an airtime hill in the second half of the ride, and the first drop is also a standout. The inversions are good enough, but not nearly as memorable. One of the great things about HangTime though is the restraints. Unlike some of the other coasters on this list, this ride does not have restrictive or uncomfortable restraints. It features just lap bars. Number 5. Tatsu at Six Flags Magic Mountain. 4 inversions. This is one of the world's premier B&M flying coasters. A large reason for this is its size and setting. If the coaster wasn't tall enough already, this ride has crazy elevation. The coaster's structure stands 170 feet in the air, but because you're on the top of a hill in the center of the park, you can see quite a long way. If you can handle the height and visuals, enjoy them, because they're some of the best visuals you're going to get on any coaster. Similar to how I said there aren't very many floorless coasters better than Medusa, there certainly aren't very many flying coasters better than Tatsu. Number 4. Wonder Woman Flight of Courage at Six Flags Magic Mountain. 3 inversions. Now, Wonder Woman is certainly not built for the inversions. It's much more so built for the airtime, but the inversions are definitely a part of it. The standout moments are for sure the moments where you get ejected out of your seat, but Wonder Woman still has some pretty solid inversions, a dive loop at the beginning and then 2 floatier inversions in the second half. It's the mix of elements that makes this coaster great, and I really wish I'd been able to snag more than one ride on it on my visit to the park last year. Number 3. West Coast Racers at Six Flags Magic Mountain. 4 inversions. This is an awesome Premier Rides launch coaster. This ride's main claim to fame is the fact that it duels, and it duels on every single ride, which is awesome. All the inversions are fun, but my personal favorite is the first one because this provides the best hang time. Plus, being able to look down at the other train below you is pretty sweet. Number 2. Railblazer at California's Great America. 3 inversions. Here's another one where the ride is not designed with the focus on inversions. In fact, all of the top 4 isn't. However, this ride is very good for its moments of airtime, and the inversions definitely are a good inclusion. Railblazer is one of the most powerful coasters you'll ever ride. Unfortunately, it is on the shorter side, as it has less than 30 seconds of prime ride time, but for what you get, I'll accept it. In the case of this coaster, it's definitely quality over quantity. And coming in at number 1 is Joker at Six Flags Discovery Kingdom. 3 inversions. Well, here's Joker again, folks. If you're a subscriber to the channel, you know that this ride comes up probably more often than it should, for whatever reason. Joker is a very solid ride in my opinion, and the inversions are definitely a big reason for it. There's awesome hang time. Both the Zero-G stall and the barrel roll have some of the best hang time on any coaster. And with that, I think it's a good place to leave off for this video. So, of all the coasters I mentioned, of all the multi-loopers in California, which is your favorite? Let me know down in the comment section below. As always, I really truly appreciate you stopping by and taking a few minutes out of your day to watch. If you would consider subscribing, that would be very much appreciated as we're coming up to the 3-year anniversary of this channel. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.